So when we look at this technology, much like self-driving cars, it's not about the technology. It's about us humans and how we are going to leverage this technology and evolve or not evolve over time. So I'd like to think that we pour billions, trillion or more, into the evolution of AI technology and all the supporting factors. At the same time, far too little attention is going into the human-centered aspects. Call it the soft science of AI. How AI isn't magic.
Hi, Bryan. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Junko. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Well, I was really looking forward to this conversation. We have today Bryan Reimer. He's a research scientist at the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics ACE Lab. I'm going to spend a little bit more later that what this, Bryan's job in the last 25 years entails before getting into the book, which is coming out this week. Right, Bryan?
October 23rd in Europe and digitally globally. And then it'll be out in print in the United States on November 25th.
Excellent. So this is the book called How to Make AI Useful, Moving Beyond Hype to Real Progress in Business, Society, and Life. This was co-authored with the Swedish futurist
Yeah.
Magnus Lundqvist. Bryan would be able to walk us through what this book is all about. But before getting into that, Bryan, please introduce yourself to our audience. Many of our audience know who Bryan is, but I still would like you to explain because I think the reason why your book is different from any other AI generalist book is that because your experience being a leading thinker of the future of mobility and AI.
So, Junko, I think we can rewind back about a quarter century.
Yeah.
When I was in my academic studies, I spent a lot of time both taking computer science classes, which did include AI at that point in time. I wish I had the textbook. In leveraging AI tools from neural networks to genetic algorithms in my research. So, back 25 years ago when we were stringing computers together to try to solve genetic algorithm problems in approaches that at the time were NP hard, kind of, conceptually not solvable, today would solve faster than a light switch flips. AI has always dotted elements of my research. So while over the last 25 years or so, I've focused the bulk of my time looking at issues around driver behavior, vehicle automation, and the future of mobility. And in essence, the human's role in complex social technical systems. AI has always been a tool in the toolbox, from deep learning all the way through to work we're doing today that touches on more advanced large language models and beyond. So it's a tool. Now, through that, 2-decade plus research trajectory, I've spent a lot of time focused on the future of automobility. From the early days of self-driving is going to be in everybody's hand in less than 5 years to it's still 5 years away today. I believe that while the future very well may be autonomous, the road to autonomy is long and winding. And it's long and winding not because of the technology in and of itself. Yeah, I mean, look, Waymo today is doing impressive things with the technology in certain cities. But the business case and the societal implications to moving that technology out at scale are far greater than any of the technologists often like to accept and believe. Look, we all think about the iPhone as a device that transcends time, but at the end of the day, many of us were using BlackBerries and iPods before that. We were predisposed to like this technology, and what Steve Jobs really did is took away the keyboard, made a touch screen, and made it more interactive. So we had handheld devices for a number of years before that. Okay, self-driving cars are going to be the next smartphone. No, there's too much social technological component to that in a highly complex operating environment and a safety-centric system that has to satisfy constraints that consumer electronics never do. I've watched it as a pragmatic possibilist. Yes. Do I believe AI is going to transcend how we live and move? Yeah. Is it going to do it wholeheartedly tonight and reap corporate rewards as those creating automated vehicles on our roads dream of? No, not overnight. It's going to take time, work, and the technologies we are creating today will create utilities somewhere we're not even dreaming of. So that's
Mm,
not to say that I believe NVIDIA, OpenAI, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and a host of others aren't doing interesting things. They are. But the winners and losers are something that we just don't understand. One of those companies is likely to become the next IBM or Microsoft, reinventing itself over and over time. Another
right.
one of those companies likely to become the next Yahoo. The brand survives, but a former shell of its former self. Now, if you can predict which becomes the winner and which becomes the loser, we shouldn't be listening to this podcast. You should be ensuring your time on Wall Street is well paid. So when we look to the AI landscape today, I think
Yeah.
what has really shifted things is that AI is now at a consumer's fingertips and is both the allure of business decision makers. Oh my God, how I can change things, as well as the thorn in a business decision maker's side. When you look at some MIT research, not ours, others on the campus, 95% of AI pilots in the
Right.
last year or so have failed.
Yeah.
Okay, and the level of work slop in the workplace is rising explosively. So there are pluses and minuses that we are going to have to sort through. And obviously, we can take a laundry list of more societal questions, from biases to security and geopolitics. So when we look at this technology, much like self-driving cars, it's not about the technology. It's about us humans and how we are going to leverage this technology and evolve or not evolve over time. So I'd like to think that we pour billions, if not globally, trillion or more, into the evolution of AI technology and all the supporting factors.
Yeah.
At the same time, far too little attention is going into the human-centered aspects. Call it the soft science of AI. How AI isn't magic, it's really meticulous at scale, working to enhance how we live and move. It's not going to end everybody's job overnight. It's going to change everybody's job over years to come.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, it already has.
Yeah. No, I like the point that you made. AI is not about technology, it is about us. All right, we're going to go to that place. But first, how did you start writing this book? I mean, what was the impetus of this book?
So the impetus of this book was a challenge. So my colleagues at AI Sweden gave me a challenge. We'd like to have you give a keynote on AI, and this is a challenge I was given about 2 years ago. And we'd like to hear what your thoughts are on the current state of AI, and do a keynote for us. And okay, it's very rare that I get a blank slate of I got to think about something new. A beautiful challenge. I wish every day was all about doing something new. Okay, so the course of a couple months, I get to go back and forth of, okay, what's my statement on something new here? And some of those facets are, as humans, we really should be thinking AI is an opinion. AI is built by humans for humans. It errs in ways that humans do. AI hallucinates. Why would you expect it not to? Humans hallucinate. So it's a great opinion. It's an opinion that is probably better than half of our friends in most situations, not all. And we're obviously talking about the modern aspects of AI here, but in general, we're talking about a evolution of computing systems that can support us in very unique ways. And I kind of gotten frustrated with the pursuit of artificial intelligence. We have to be better than human rhetoric,
Ah,
and saying, okay, much like my feelings around highly automated vehicles, it's driver support, it's co-pilot, not autopilot. Um, and put a keynote together. And I gave that keynote in early April of 2024.
Okay.
And a long-term colleague of mine in Sweden, Ola Bernström, comes up to me afterward and says, every C-suite member of the Fortune 500 and beyond needs to hear that talk. Okay, clearly I hit something. A couple months later, I'm sitting after a talk I gave on automated vehicles, threading a little of my feelings of AI in at Belron's Best of Belron's conference in Lisbon. I meet Magnus at dinner, or just before dinner. We sit down at dinner. He asked me, we're talking about a whole bunch of different topics. At one point, he asked me, what do you think about AI? And I gave him my story, and he said, well, I was thinking of writing a book there. And I said, okay. It's interesting. I'd love to write a book there, but fitting in time, and here we are today. So the book came out of Magnus and I both talking about the strengths and weaknesses, but it comes from that, the foundations of that talk. AI's most useful aspect is augmenting and accelerating human capabilities. Sure, at one point in time in the future, it may automate lots of different things that it's not today. But for now, when we think about autonomous agents, there is usually a human in the background someplace. So when we think about drone warfare, lots of people think the drones are all making these decisions. No, it's a box of people in the background. When we think about automated vehicles, we think about the driverless aspect. Well, there's more human capital in the back end, from teleoperation to sensor repair and calibration to cleaning these cars, that anybody wants to talk about. Right. So when we think about AI, yes, the algorithms can solve new statistical inference beyond anybody's statistician's dream. But the real grounding comes is, how does this help us? Creating, as a recent Nobel Prize was awarded, a macroscope to just look much more broadly at data than we've ever thought before, derive meaning, and quite frankly, changing the whole economy of the internet at the same time. We see people beginning to rely on AI synthesis of information versus their own. And there's good and bad points of that. The good points is it's faster. And quite frankly, AI synthesizes a lot of information better than half of us. Again, it's a regression to the mean. So at the end of the day, it's on average going to be better than about half and not as good as other people can do. So, the hard part is, much like automated vehicles, how do we embrace the accelerant aspects of this? Assistive driving has got great accelerant convenience aspects. How do we mitigate the negative? Okay, humans by their very nature are lazy creatures. If we can find an easier way, we often do. And that's the whole work sloth debate today. Yeah. So I think if we harness the evolution of AI well, the top performers are going to explode, but we need to figure out how we are going to motivate the folks that are becoming too over-reliant on this technology. And we need to look at the workplace today. And if I'm an executive leader, I'd be looking at the folks producing 10-page papers who had a hard time producing one page and reminding them, all I care about is the bullet points. You're over-relying on AI, and that's not acceptable here. So we need to look at, how do we move the workforce to encourage people to embrace and leverage these tools to make themselves better, not to embrace these tools as a crutch that makes things too easy in life. And I think that's the ecosystem we need to start thinking of, and moving beyond the technology to how do we augment and accelerate and amplify human behavior.
But at the same time, just to be a devil's advocate, humans always go for the easiest way. You mentioned that rather than 10-page summary, you want to have bullet points. Or, rather than using AI as a clutch, you want to have people to use tools to succinctly summarize what the point of the story is. I get that, but at the same time, we do choose the easiest way out. Doesn't that mean that we're going to lose that capability to do that?
Well, Junko, I think that's a good point. And I'm going to go back to my 20 plus years in auto safety for a moment.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of assistive driving features, but they have to come with the necessary driver supports that nudge and support us and encourage us to be attentive drivers along the way. So technologies like autopilot, I've long written of haven't been overly supportive over the years. Not
Yeah.
because it's not a cool technology, because it was built as a technology without the necessary driver supports. Yes, Tesla has gotten a little better over the course of a decade, but it's a little too late.
Yeah.
Other companies like GM developed the Super Cruise product, Ford Blue Cruise, that are really developed around the human. It is a technology combined together with the necessary support features that encourage us to be doing the right thing. And by encouraging us to do the right thing, we actually end up with a system that probably has a number of unique benefits. So let's go over to ChatGPT,
Sure.
Copilot, or a bunch of other tools.
Yeah.
These are great augmenters, summarizing information in ways, providing me with a communications team on steroids at my fingertips.
Right.
Okay. But all they are doing for me is providing me an electronic colleague that is working with me to make something better. As soon as I begin to rely on that electronic colleague, like delegating everything to my underlings,
Yeah.
that's not working anymore.
Yeah.
So, okay, the question is, in a vehicle with partial automation, we're using technology to support. In this case, we need to use a little societal pressure to support. If
Yeah.
I produce an article or a report from my manager that is too heavily reliant on AI, my manager needs to in essence, chop off my access and hold me responsible to be doing my job. Now, this is a whole cultural shift of responsibility here. God help us.
Yeah.
Okay. Much like a student would be significantly reprimanded in one shape or form for writing a dissertation at MIT with ChatGPT and not exposing that,
Yeah.
probably would not be finishing their dissertation. The same needs to exist in corporations today. So if you have an employee who is using these tools outside of the bounding box and continuing to produce work slop, that is not an
Mhm.
employee you really want in your organization. We need to move on. And employees need to understand that that's not tolerable here. So this is obviously, think about societal issues. This is a whole new area for HR. How do we get rid of the folks who are too reliant on technology, not on their own brains? That's where I think AI has the incredible ability to shape and support us. On the other hand, yeah, I mean, you create an article, you ask for opinions out of the AI agent of how is the average individual going to interpret this,
Yeah.
and you get a perspective that you can use to hone your messages over and over and over again until you're
Mm.
providing a message that's got the right tone for the audience you want. But you can do that in minutes or hours versus days and weeks, which means that yes, we can create more content, but if we're doing it right, we're creating better content.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that needs to be prioritized out there.
Yeah.
So, look, intelligence has always been mistaken for mysticism. And we can really think about how these algorithms can augment us. But we as a culture need to shape to embrace that. And we as a culture need to hold our colleagues, our friends, our kids responsible to leverage this stuff in ways that make us all better and society better as a whole.
And that is a huge homework, though. I mean, it's like that's something that we never had to do as a parent, as a teacher, as a boss. That's something that nobody really had to do, right? This is a whole new world.
Well, yes and no. I mean, look,
Okay.
when we started creating computer software to do things, yeah, we started
Ah,
automating things. Yeah, it's not new, but we've never really held folks as responsible as we're going to need to because there are a lot of folks that by default are going to get a little more lazy. Now, look, humans learn by doing, okay? We learn to drive by driving. As
yeah.
we drive less, our skills to drive are not going to be as strong. Look, the future is a bunch of novice drivers. Yes, the future is going to change what we are good at. Well, my kids no longer learn cursive writing. They still print. Okay. They're not going to write in the same way as I learned 20 or 30 years. We need to embrace that new is okay, but we still need to be developing a core set of skills that we haven't quite settled on. Now,
Mm.
this is because technology evolves really faster than our institutions. Our ability to adapt, not our ability to code, will determine AI's success. Okay, it's all about how we are going to be willing to change to enable and ingrain AI in our lives. Again, I do not support, automate, automate, automate. No, we need a role. We need to be looking to how each of us makes ourselves better. big mental health debate in the U.S. and mental health care over the last 20 plus years. Those investing in their mental health put in work to be better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The same is true here. Those investing in AI are going to put in work to be better.
Yeah.
Now let's flip this around. There are a lot of folks out there who say, hey, I'm never touching these tools. They're bad. Those are folks that are going to lose the advantage of using and leveraging technology that can augment them. I am not arguing that we should all become over-reliant on AI tools and produce, context that is driven by prompts. But if you're not willing to embrace that these technologies can ensure what you're doing is done better, you're going down the road of those who resisted the smartphone and resisted the personal computer and still live with candles versus electricity. Sorry, the future is AI enabled. The question is, how are we going to augment ourselves to leverage that?
It does require discipline, though, Bryan. I mean, it doesn't come so naturally, right? I mean, well, let me ask you this. All those big hyperscalers and the big companies that are, or startups, developing AI models, why are they so hung up on creating new AI models that will replace humans? I haven't seen, I'd like to see a whole new startups whose sole job is to augment humans.
I'm not so sure that they're all hung up on artificial general intelligence and replacing humans. Many individuals in many organizations who still believe AGI is the goal. And it's a laudable goal. And over the last 50 years or so, or perhaps since Turing, it's been a reasonable goal. But today, that point of augmentation of humans is an area I think is growing attention, and in even the big players, the open AIs, Microsoft Copilot, these are being increasingly brought into ways to augment and support. And part of this is that I think these organizations are starting to realize that, okay, it's not about the technology, it's about how do we make it useful day in and day out. That's going to be critical. But I think it's also an important aspect of a lot of the investment in these technologies now is making them better, but more important, making them more efficient. Domain-specific AI that you've talked extensively about, small language models. There's a lot of critique out around the newest OpenAI models.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they weren't as good in certain situations. They were better in others. And I think the reason behind that is because they are becoming more domain-specific, tailoring, trying to use less compute, to solve problems. Now, I think that's actually an advantage. We're trying to take from huge models and huge environmental costs to making this much more practical and implementable. So I think that when we think about AI, we got to remember that predicting AI's timeline is more difficult than predicting its direction. It's going to get better and better. It's going to support us in more interesting ways. The weak will get weaker and the strong will get stronger. How fast? Well, it's sort of like self-driving. It'll be here in 5 years.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. This has been bugging me for a long time. Actually, not really bugging me. What I learned from you over the years, interviewing you, writing about your research results. One of the things that really impressed me that you actually really focused on, with the work with AVT and all that, that you focus on how humans react to automation, right? And a lot of times your research has revealed that the humans are not responding to automation the way that people who developed automation expected them to. And that kind of work is really spectacular in learning about the development ADAS systems. But what about in the areas of AI research? I mean, shouldn't be wouldn't you be doing, how to augment AI kind of research more?
Well, it's interesting, and I'm thinking about that a lot more now, Junko. But it's been an evolution over my career. Yes, 20 years of spending most of my time thinking about auto safety and autonomy. has led to where I am today. And I think one of the things that really connects a lot of pieces of technology together is technology generally really doesn't replace the human elements. It reallocates this. There's a title of a Nature piece we wrote years ago, driverless is not humanless. So AI is just relocating where the human elements of the puzzle need to fit in. I'm not the only one here. There are a number of other researchers involved in evolving this thought point. Perhaps just given where I've been over the last couple of years and how I've been involved in the autonomous driving race, my pragmatic possibilist viewpoint here is at the right time in the right place. I do see the ceiling above us. I see the floor below us, and I think there is a path to productivity, through the open door in front of us. And I think that path is less about technology, and it is more about the humans element. And this is shaped by the last decade, watching, listening, and taking a pragmatic view on automated driving. Look, I am amazed by what Waymo is doing. I don't think it's financially sustainable. I think that the elements of how safe is safe enough, the title of my colleague Phil Koopman's book, and the economics of the business model of robotaxis are the bigger, problems than continuing to evolve the technology. So for automated vehicles to survive, it's how do we create a safety case that really does make sense?
Yeah.
And better than humans at start and a whole lot better in 5 years is to me the necessity. But at the end of the day, if you can't make money with it, it's not a business. It's an investment.
Yeah.
And we can't invest in technology forever. We need to think about how to balance that investment with revenue to keep funding the investment. The same's true here in AI. And again, maybe it's that fact that I was forced to think about my statement here. As soon as you begin to think about AI as a really good opinion, not as science fiction's Jetson-like, it becomes a lot more useful. Hey, this summary is a darn good opinion. It is not gospel.
Yeah. Good. All right. To wrap it up, though, I want to go back to my original question that I had in mind. When you started writing this book, this is about a year ago, correct, Bryan?
Yep.
Who did you have in mind as the right audience for this book? And has that changed over time? Because AI is the area where the things are moving very fast and everybody's so interested in the investment going on, OpenAI is doing and the circular economy and all that. The conversation has really shifted, especially over the last few months on the investment side of the AI. Who do you want this book to be read?
So the title of the book is How to Make AI Useful, and the subtitle is Moving Beyond Hype to Real Progress in Business, Society, and Life. And it is very much the three pieces there. First, business, because I believe at the end of the day that business has to embrace the right directions to actually get this out there. Second is society, because the political forces, in essence, build the laws and the guardrails that are going to guide business. And finally, I really think we as consumers need to understand the influence of this technology. So the book is written with those three lenses in mind, in kind of those three orders. The consumer is never going to see this if business doesn't create it and policy doesn't enable it. But it is, an academic colleague said to me, you hit a really nice tone here in something that is quite readable by the consumer, but has the key messages that are needed for business and policy. So optimally, all of those audiences benefit from this book, but the money is going to have to come from business, and business is going to have to be the key democratizing force behind AI. If the investments stopped on the business side, this technology is not going anywhere. Governments need to embrace that. Look, we are tactically augmenting laws globally right now to kind of figure out things here.
Right.
But really and truly, the benefits are going to come when we repave strategically, and we talk about this in the book, the fact that we need to really rethink strategically how AI is going to thread into our landscape. Much like electricity, the personal computer, and the smartphone, AI has to seamlessly float in the background somewhere, perhaps not as silently as electricity, but more physically relevant over time so that we don't get too lazy.
Yeah.
I think that consumers need to understand that this is an opinion and perhaps a great tag team, again, co-pilot, not autopilot. But we need to begin to prepare for a changing world where our culture is going to need to normalize AI as a partner. We're going to need to encourage curiosity, reduce fear. Can the academic world solve this today? No, we can't move fast enough. My advice to CEOs is create sandboxes that allow your organization to start small and scale and pilot and think out of the box. Move fast, break things, and fix them. But don't bet your entire organization on this. Allow people to innovate, share, move faster. Textbooks are going to be a little slow on this topic. Democratize the expertise in your organization.
Yeah.
If you're a consumer, play, 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 play.
Yeah.
When we were kids, we played in the sandbox. We discovered new things. We feel unencumbered by the natural process of learning.
Yeah.
If you want to evolve to use these tools, start playing with them. Open a prompt, ask a few questions, iterate a few times. Try to understand what it's doing for you, how it can help you, what it simplifies, what it makes more complex. But remember, at all points, all it is a great opinion. It is not perfect fact.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I think so few people actually call it opinion because a lot of people call it as the fact or truth, and it's far from it.
Very exciting time we live in.
Yeah.
We have the ability to script a lot of how these technologies help us live, help us move, help us work, with the possibility to take a few of the mundane activities, sorting through my disastrous email box, automating a little of that, assisting me with a little bit of that, putting a communications team at my fingertips, finding information in the web that Google searches could never find. I had to find an article the other day. I went to Google the old-fashioned way, Googled, couldn't find it, went to OpenAI, asked it, and in 3 seconds, OpenAI found it. And part of it was I was just, I remembered it framed in as a framing A, and reality is it was framed as framing B, and Google couldn't, traditional Google search can't do that. OpenAI said, hey, A is a lot like B, and broadened that search characteristics, and it plucked it right out of the literature for me. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So we need to unlearn as much as we learn new and embrace that change can be okay. But we as humans need to ask the ultimate question. Will we let AI change us? And the question is, for those who say, yeah, I'm going to let AI change me a little bit, but I'm going to make sure it changes me for the better, those are the ones who are going to succeed in the new market economy. The folks who say, no, I'm never letting this change me, are going to be lost in time. And the folks who get awful lazy are the ones that we need to figure out how we motivate in a new market economy.
All right. Very good. Well, thanks for the enlightening talk, and we'll catch up soon. But good luck with your book, and hope that more people will have the opportunity to open this book because it does give you a different perspective. It's not the usual, AI this, AI that. It is something different. Okay. Thank you.
Junko, thanks for having me on today.